Welcome, everyone, and thanks for attending MC's Women's Powerhouse series. Today is the first session of this new three-part series, each designed to inspire female-identifying students on their entrepreneurial journey and to build your confidence that you can build your business. My name is Rachel Poutler, and I'll be your host today, coming to you live from Kitchener, Ontario, which is just about an hour west of Toronto. I'm MC's newest startup coach. I'm available to book meetings with you to discuss your business ideas one-on-one, and I'll also be returning as host of this series as well. Before we jump in today, we would like to acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on the lands where you are located and the Indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territory. We are excited to be joined by two guest speakers today as part of our panel, Sonia from WeDistill and Margaret from MedAtlas. So in a second, I'll let both of you introduce yourselves. But first, just to let the audience know, if you are interested in asking questions throughout this broadcast, which I highly recommend, you can do that through the chat. So please don't be hesitant with your questions. We would love to answer them. We'd love to engage with you. Your questions are what we want to answer today. So with that, I will ask Amy to bring up Margaret and Sonia to the stage. Amazing. Thank you all for being here today. So I'm going to start with Margaret. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did before you started your current company?
Before I started my current company, I was doing my PhD. So I'm currently at the University of Waterloo completing my PhD in the School of Public Health and Health Systems. But prior to that, I was working in sub-Saharan Africa, where my experience is around sexual and reproductive health and maternal and women's health, which I'm really passionate about. So a lot of the work I've done has been in the healthcare sector, ensuring that women have access to proper maternal health care and have positive outcomes when they do visit health facilities.
Amazing. Okay, and you already hinted at your company, so I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about MedAtlas. What do you do? Who is your customer? And what is the current stage of your business today?
So MedAtlas is a healthcare startup, and our goal is to make it easier for folks in Africa to find specialist doctors. I've been working with fertility hospitals in sub-Saharan Africa for a long time, and it's very difficult to access specialist doctors because they're few and often centered in urban areas. So the best way I can explain it is think about folks who live in the Northern Territories, for instance, trying to access healthcare. So we're leveraging telemedicine and ensuring that we have licensed specialists on our platform that folks can access anywhere, wherever they are on the continent very easily, and can access multiple doctors based on cost or preference or location. And so where we are at right now, we're building phase 2 of our MVP. We had a successful initial launch in East and Southern Africa. And so we're taking on that feedback from our customers and reiterating to provide a platform that best fits their needs.
Amazing. Congratulations on the launch. That's a really exciting milestone for sure. All right, we'll turn it over to Sonia. I'd love to, if you could tell us about what you did before starting your current company. Oh, we cannot hear you right now.
There we go. First of all,
There you
congratulations, Margaret. Congratulations. Okay, so what I used to do before is I was a former broadcast journalist. So I was a television reporter and anchor, and I did that for CTV and CBC for over a decade until I decided to, get out of the business and go back to school, get my MBA, and now I'm building WeDistill. So I went to my schooling. I got a BA from Radio and Television Arts, from Ryerson, the Radio and Television Arts program, and then my MBA is from Schulich.
Amazing. Okay, and tell us more about WeDistill.
So WeDistill is a mobile platform where we match people and beauty and wellness brands based on their shared values. So we enable people to share their values, and when we match them with values-aligned brands and people, then that person then is able to create their own community of people and brands that are aligned And then they work together to distill all things beauty and wellness so they can increase transparency, learn more, and be able to shop together with confidence.
Fantastic. Thank you both for being here again today. So we're going to dive into questions. So now that we know who our presenters are, I'm going to direct this to the audience again. If you have questions that come up throughout this conversation, put them in chat and we'd love to answer them. I have a bunch of questions ready to go. And also, Margaret, I know that you have to step out quickly, so we will make sure that we factor that into our conversation today. So awesome. Thank you, Amy, for pointing out where the chat is. With that, I'd love to get started by asking you both a pretty simple question, but can be a pretty complex answer. What made you start your companies, and how did you know it was the right time to start your companies? And we'll start with Margaret.
Wow, yes, a very simple but complex question. So a couple of things came together to create the perfect storm to start the company. One, my company is very closely related to my PhD research. And so I was already researching in the area, and my PhD work is focusing on access to affordable fertility care. And so that research allowed me to see that there is a gap in the market in my home continent that can be addressed. Fortunately, also living in Canada allowed me to see how they are addressing these gaps for folks who live in rural communities, for instance. So it was taking on something that's already working in Canada, for instance, and transferring that into the context I was in. This is something that I was already passionate about because I had worked with women in particular who are experiencing challenges in speaking to doctors or knowing who the right doctor is, and that the burden that was. So I already understood how difficult the issue was. And then, of course, COVID came along, which then forced us to use, telecommunication much in the same way that we're doing now. And so it was fortunate in that people on the continent were now more willing to connect virtually, which is something in the healthcare system, things change slowly. So COVID has forced us to look outside of that and say, how can we connect even if we're not leaving our homes? And so it was a perfect storm. And fortunately, I'm at the University of Waterloo, which is a university institution all about innovation. So I was surrounded by students that were innovating or who had startups, but also there were coaches available who I could talk through my ideas with and think about how to shape that into a business that's sustainable, but that also gives back to the community.
Amazing. Thank you. So with that, how did you know that, oh, sorry, I'm directing this back to Margaret. So how did you know that this was a good idea to start a company? It sounds like a perfect storm that caused you to do it, but I guess more checking in with yourself. Like, how did you know that you wanted to start this company?
How did I know that I wanted to start with? I had a community of support, let me put it that way, that I was discussing this idea with to make sure that it makes sense. So fortunately, my mother's an entrepreneur. This is a tech company. My brother is a software engineer, and I work with healthcare professionals. So these are the people that would be using the platform. So it's an idea that I discussed with them first, and that helped shape the way this would work. Obviously, I needed to know that it was something that's needed. As they always say, make something that people want. So I had to make sure that this is something that they would want, that they would be willing to try. And so that's what gave me the confidence to say, okay, let me start this business.
Amazing. Great to know that you kind of had that support network built up before you even started. And you also, talk to people to understand if this is actually a need that you need to start this company for. Okay, I'm going to turn the same question over to Sonia. So I'd love to know, what made you start your company, and how did you know that starting a company was a good idea?
Well, I've always wanted to start a company, to be honest with you, ever since I was a little girl. So there's goes that. For me, the reason why I got into journalism was because of my passion for people and stories, as well as being able to give people the information that they need, that they deserve to know. It's tough to find to research and get everything that you need in order to make informed choices. And there was such a gap in the market around values, around purpose-driven beauty, trying to make sure that, when you purchase something, that the money that you're paying for, whatever it may be, a product or backing a brand, that brand stands for what you believe in. And it's very difficult to find information around that. And of course, a lot of the purpose-driven brands, it's very important for them to align themselves with values-driven customers. As you know, sometimes you might spend, $20 to acquire a customer, and that money's out the door if that's not a repeatable customer. So, knowing that there's such a need in the marketplace, knowing that, just the way an industry was evolving and consumer behavior was evolving, that I knew that this was something worth doing. And it was right in my wheelhouse in terms of not just contextual and interactive storytelling data. As a journalist, you actually work with data all the time, unbeknownst to many people. You don't just go up there and say, "Hey, I feel." You back that up with information, with real concrete facts, and you use that with data. So to me, I was very comfortable doing that, and yeah, it just felt right, especially around beauty and wellness, and knowing that beauty is so, we judge ourselves by it. Society judges us by it as well. And to me, if we're not surrounding ourselves with the right people, as well as knowing that, how do I as a person give back to the world? You can do that in a variety of ways. And a lot of people do that with their money. So for me to be able to build something that could serve as a need on both sides, for both the brands as well as the consumer searching for those values aligned brands, was extremely important to me. So yeah.
Amazing. All right. Thank you for that context into how you started your companies and how you decided to start your companies. So part of the purpose of this series, the Women's Powerhouse series, is to really understand the struggles and obstacles that female founders often run into. So we're going to cover a lot of challenges that you may run into as a female founder in this conversation, but we're also going to hopefully give you some tips and tricks for like getting through those obstacles. Also, we want to talk about the good things. So one of the things that Margaret mentioned earlier was support networks. I feel like female founders do that a lot better, or female identifying founders do that a lot better than our male counterparts. But we can definitely get into that a little bit later. So I want to start with kind of a hardball question, because this is definitely something that I think is on the top of a lot of people's minds. So the tech industry is definitely male dominated. I mean, there's no question about it. It can be hard to defy social norms in terms of what someone who does identify as female should be doing with their career. So I'll open this up to whoever wants to start first. I'd love if you could just tell us about like how you overcame that social norm and decided, you know what, I'm doing it. This is for me, and I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Actually, it's probably easier in a virtual world for me to point to people. So we'll start with Margaret again.
Thanks. Yes, it is a really male-dominated field. But for me, I'm addressing an issue, fertility, which is predominantly female. So I understand the issue better than a male would, and I understand the market better. So the first thing is that if you believe that you understand the problem or the solution that you're trying to bring to market, your gender really doesn't matter. So for me, I was confident in that. However, it's a tech solution. And so now I'm delving into software development or computer science, which is a very male dominated space. So one of the first things I did was, one, of course, as I mentioned, the support network, talking to my brother about what that space looks like. How does he create connections in that kind of space? Because those were not part of the networks that I was used to being a part of. So there was a conversation around, there are many Slack channels that tech folks like to use, or conferences or spaces, even within the university where I'm at, that tech communities like to meet. But I also actively went on LinkedIn to look for women who are founders in my area, health tech, who were further ahead in the journey than I was. And I would just send them a message and say, look, what you're doing is inspiring, and I just want to speak to you, learn about what the challenges are, to help you anticipate what challenges you might face in your particular industry, but also provide solutions to how you can overcome that. Networking is powerful when you're entrepreneurship. It's really about who you know. So you have to actually get out of your comfort zone and start, consciously. Obviously, you can't just talk to everyone because that's time consuming, but be intentional about the people that you're meeting and take stock of their journey, and try and see how you can incorporate it into your own. Another thing, of course, for me was hiring. Now, if you own a company, of course you have to start hiring and building your team. And my personal experience, I found that when I was interviewing male candidates, I had to come across as more serious. There is something that would happen when I'm smiling. This is my natural persona, but that doesn't work when I'm in an interview setting, for some reason. And so I had to take stock of that, and realize that in certain settings, you're going to have to come across as more serious or more firm or more hard, hard, should I say, just to be taken seriously by those that you'll be working with. So as a female, that's something that I had to learn coming into this space.
Amazing. That leads into one of my future questions, but we're going to switch it over to Sonia first. I'd love to know how you overcame the social norms of what a woman should do with their career. I mean, maybe with journalism, you already did that, but tell us more about how you overcame working in the tech industry.
Well, it's interesting because I think everything's tied. I can't say that, it's about a skill set. And it's interesting because when I was a little girl, I overheard somebody extremely close to me pretty much tell somebody else, I didn't think I was smart enough. They didn't think I was going to be able to go to university. And it was because I used to stutter. I had a horrible speech impediment. And unbeknownst to anybody, I also had ADHD. I was undiagnosed. So after 3 years of constantly, going to speech therapy, as well as, trying to always prove that I am good enough or I'm worth paying attention to, I knew I always had to work 10 times harder than somebody else because I couldn't remember things. I couldn't focus. So that meant trying to fill in the gaps here because maybe, the skill that I needed, I didn't have because of the ADHD was in the way. So that it's important to mention that because I look at things extremely differently. It's about knowing, I think, who's in front of you. I've been underestimated my entire life. So to me, every challenge I've ever approached and overcome is just one more thing that where I gain the confidence to move forward. So me moving in technology, I expect it. And I expect to I do, I really do. I've been insulted, 100% I've been insulted. I've been told, oh yeah, no, what you're building is nothing special. And I've been able to, over the years, look at a situation and say, where is this person coming from, and take my emotions completely out of the equation and understand what does this person actually want and what exactly are they trying to say. Some people might not like you because you're doing something that they don't want you to do, or maybe it's a reflection, on them. You know what I mean? Maybe you're doing something that they don't have the courage to. So to understand exactly where a person's coming from is really important, and it's about really not defying social expectations, so to speak, because I think that's really difficult to do. It's about knowing when you walk into that room and you open your mouth, your job is to make sure that they forget what it is you look like. So everything that's coming out of your mouth, it's to sell why they should bet on you, and that they're losing out if they don't. That's your job. So that's how I approach everything.
Amazing. So, Margaret, one of the things that you mentioned was about not being taken seriously. So I'll open this up to both of you. Do you feel that either you or your company have not been taken seriously, and what do you do in that situation? And we'll start with Margaret again.
In the beginning, I felt that way, but I think that's because I was also still learning how to communicate what we do and how important it is. And so, like Sonia said, some people will not take you seriously purely because they don't have the strength or the bravery to do what you're doing. And so it's very important to pay attention to who is not taking you seriously, right? The people that you want to take you seriously are, one, your customers, the people that your business is going to be serving, and two, if you're thinking about getting investment, your investors as well. So focus your energy on the people that matter. And if they're not taking it seriously, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It might be good to ask why. So for instance, in my case, I'm dealing with an issue that's in Africa. So many times the people that I'm talking to don't necessarily understand the context around why we're doing what we're doing and why it's so important. And so that opportunity to understand that helped me think, okay, you always have to create connections towards something that your audience understands. So if I'm talking to a Canadian audience, I'm going to bring in something like, maybe folks in the Northern Territories, because you can understand that context better, and then it can help you think about what we're doing, and it creates that connection. So the people that you're talking to, are you communicating it in a way that they would understand? And that takes practice, with pitching. So not just pitching in a competition, but start by pitching to your family or start by pitching to your friends. It will help you think about that elevator speech and perfect it. But most importantly, you have to believe that it's important, because if you believe it's important authentically, that will shine through when you're communicating it to other people. If you don't believe in what you're doing, it will come out when you're talking about it. So even sometimes as an individual, you ask yourself, is what I'm doing worthwhile? Is it important? So you need to answer that question for yourself and really believe it. And if you believe it in yourself first, you will naturally formulate or be able to communicate that to other people in a way that they can believe it too, the people that matter.
Amazing. Thank you. That was really good advice for when people don't take you seriously and who you should really think about taking you seriously. All right, Sonia, same question to you. So have you ever been, you or your company, not been taken serious, and what do you do?
Yeah, and you know what? Margaret is right about those marketing messages, being able to communicate your company and what you're doing, what your passion and mission is, and the vision extremely effectively, and not rambling. Get to the point is extremely important. And if people can't understand what you're doing, of course they're not going to take you seriously. What I found quite interesting, when you tell people you're doing something, the first thing they ask, how are you going to make money? How are you going to make money? So what's your business model? So if you can't even tell them how are you going to make money, or you can't even tell them, who your largest competitor is and why, and not really say, oh, my competitor is this, but not really explain to them, you know what I mean, who they are and why what you're doing is going to be very different, they're not going to take you seriously either. Right. So there are many ways, I think, to overcome that. And that's really knowing your stuff. Right.
Yeah,
You got to know your stuff.
I think one of the first questions I asked you was, how do you make money? So
right, exactly. So it's extremely important.
Amazing. Okay, we're going to keep Sonia up for a couple of minutes here. Margaret had to step out. She'll be back shortly. But next question, again, audience questions are very much appreciated. So if you have questions, please put them into the chat. But Sonia, we'll keep chatting too. So we talked a little bit about investors and just getting financing for the company. So can you speak to, have you had any issues getting any money into the company, or if you haven't raised any money yet, do you anticipate any challenges as you move forward?
Of course I do. I anticipate. I'd be shocked if I didn't have any. Really? No, we haven't. We are gearing up for our finance round. As you know, we're part of Rise Ventures. So I'm super excited to be working with a number of industry specialists to shore up our revenue model, our business model, and go to market and all of that. So, I think a big part of it is knowing who's in front of you. I expect, yes, there to be challenges, but I'd be shocked. I've had challenges my entire life. So yeah. I think a huge thing is knowing who is in front of you. And it's not just saying, okay, well, this is a company that is, investing in my space, but who are you going to be talking to? What's their background? So that you're going to approach the pitch in a completely different way, or even how you reach out to that person. Everything should be tailored in a way that you're trying to make an emotional connection in the quickest way possible. I don't know. Did I answer your question? Sometimes I ask because I have ADHD, people. If I do not answer the question, please re-ask me and just, tack on the question, please.
No, you answered the question. I think like one of the biggest things when it comes to financing, at least from what I've seen, is that investors love to talk about how they like pattern match. And I'm like, that's great when you're going to invest into like a white male, right? Because that's the pattern that they're looking for. And it comes into the business model too. But I think a lot of it comes to, just because we are not white males, we have to be that much better when it comes to seeking financing. So yes, you did answer the question. I just saw a question came in for Margaret, which we're going to ask her when she comes back. But Sonia, I'd love to ask you this question too. What is your business model? How do you make money? The audience wants to know.
Well, it's transaction fee, but we're also focused on a SaaS business model, even though it's a community platform and it's an innovation on what a marketplace is. And most people would say, okay, well, a lot of the times that may be ad revenue because there's a social aspect to it, or transaction. That makes sense. For me, it's about giving brands the tools to be able to build their business, right? And we're looking at that SaaS business model because there's a lot of upsell and retention opportunities in that, where over time you're going to be able to lower your marketing costs. So that's another reason why, and it's very few people are doing it in this particular space, which is another reason why I'm extremely excited about that particular model.
Awesome. Okay, so next we're going to take a couple of questions about, actually, we just had another question come in for you, Sonia. So how do you overcome, this actually leads nicely into the questions I was going to ask about, like your own like mental support systems and stuff like that. So how do you overcome your ADHD specificities? That's a hard word to say when I'm public speaking. How do you overcome your ADHD and gain in self-confidence over time?
Oh my goodness. Do you know, okay, so I have been embarrassed multiple times. Now I'm medicated. So, I mean, I'm good there. I mean, I'm on Concerta now. But in journalism, it was rough. It really was. And I was living that out live on television, right? So, I mean, I've been bumped, bruised, scraped. I've got all the wounds. And, every time you are in front of somebody, I do to this day sometimes get a bit of anxiety, right? Absolutely. How could I not? I mean, I've gone through some unbelievable, hardships. I think within most people they're only embarrassed around a few people, right? I was embarrassed sometimes in front of thousands of people when things don't go right. But how I learned to overcome that was to be able to draw on my surroundings so I could get through my lives. So I became extremely effective around demonstrative storytelling. So what that means is like showing and telling and walking people through and really focusing on my on-camera performance. So I knew that was extremely important in many aspects. So when I think about my ADHD, I think about it now in terms of, it's actually a blessing, to be honest with you. It allows me to think in ways that a lot of people aren't able to be honest. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of it as a blessing, and I would never wish that away for anything in the world. That is my superpower.
Yeah, I love that idea of like, identifying the things that other people think are your weaknesses and saying like, no, I'm going to own this. This is something that it makes me. I am an incredible person. So I am going to do what I need to like leverage this the best I can. So that's awesome.
Exactly. And, I just wanted to add to what you're saying. I'm not saying that medication is the answer, but for me, because I tried so many things, that once I realized that, I actually had ADHD, and I found out when I was in my second year of the MBA is when I found out. So, I was like, doc, listen, I have been suffering long enough. Let's get this fixed. What do we do? So for me, it was about, how do I remove the roadblocks so I can, so I can move that much further ahead in my own personal development. That's how I've always seen it.
Amazing. We have a couple of audience questions that have come in. So one question asks, how do you know when to let an idea rest or versus when to persevere regardless?
Okay, well, I'm a huge proponent of research. Research is everything to me. And I research in terms of, it's not just, the industry you're in, it's, consumer behavior, like what competitors are doing, where are people investing their money, how saturated is a market. When you're seeing those sorts of indicators, okay, I'm going to keep going, right? So I look at those things more than everything, because to be honest with you, I don't think data lies too much, right? Trends don't really lie too much. So I rely a lot on that kind of analysis. And then I talk to people. I talk to people around what we're building. Are they interested in it? And, am I going to validate? If people are signing up and they're signing contracts, I'm in the right place, and we're not even out yet, right? If I'm in beta and people are signing contracts, I know I'm there. If I'm having a difficult time and people are saying, so what makes you so special? This and this is the same as you, what you're doing, then I may need to go back to the drawing board, things like that. Did I answer? That makes sense, or I can?
Yep, that makes sense to me. If there are further follow-up questions, please put that in the chat and we can ask those. So another question from the audience is, what was your approach to protect your intellectual property?
Interesting. Well, number one, I trademarked We Distill. That was important to me because it was kind of like, it's the process of how we do things. So that was important. And also too, I'm extremely careful about what I tell people. I really am. I don't tell everybody everything, and it's, not everyone's going to sign an NDA. I ask a lot of people to sign NDAs. Some people I don't, because there's no need. But typically, I just don't tell people everything. There's certain things that they need to know. And you have to also be mindful when people are asking certain questions that they really don't need to know. Red flag. Why do you need to know that? Also, too, doing some research on people as well. You're going into meetings with people. You need to know who is in front of you. What are they building? Who are they associated with? I always do my research on everybody I meet, right? So that's important as well, to know, where people are coming from. And you can garner a lot by, what people say to you, right? But the number one thing is you don't need to tell everybody everything. Yeah. Keep it bare bones until, you're further enough along where then they can see it. But sometimes they may see what's on the first surface, but not really what's under the hood, so to speak, right?
Yeah, for sure. Just for the audience, in case you're unfamiliar with this term, Sonia, one of the things that you mentioned was an NDA. That is a non-disclosure agreement, in case anyone wonders what that is. That's basically an agreement between two parties that says we can't disclose to the public what we talked about. So if you're interested in intellectual property, look up the term non-disclosure agreement. That would be something that you can use to protect yourself.
And also, too quickly, Rachel, too, the beta user agreement is important too, right? Sometimes, people are coming in your beta and you want to make sure that there is a contract there. They're there to do certain things. And a big part of that contract is making sure they're not running off with your intellectual property. You know what I mean? Sure. All of a sudden you see, some other business pop up and you're like, isn't that my business? Right? You don't want that happening to you. So, do everything that you can contractually anyway.
Awesome. Okay, next question from the audience. So the study's statistics show that males are generally more risk-taking than females. How do you think females can become more comfortable with the risks associated with starting your own business?
Interesting. I think, that's an interesting question. And I say that because I think women have a tendency to almost walk into a room, almost saying, thank you for opening the door, not walking in and saying, okay, with almost an attitude like, well, finally the door is open.
Right.
Right. And make no mistake about it. Men perform. They perform. When I say perform, I mean that perception is extremely important to men. It really is. And it's about, saying who they are, essentially, answering the question, not rambling, and getting to the point. Uh, Women aren't like that. We're really not. And somebody said something to me once, and it was a man, and he said, you know what? Women take too long to make decisions. They wait and then they ponder, and the whole, world could be falling apart, and they wait, and you know what I mean? No, men don't do that. They figure it out, and they make the decision, right? It's about showing, I think, that showing that you need to be taken seriously. And that is by going in there, speaking confidently, and presenting facts. It's not, I feel, get rid of those words, and back it up, back up everything that you're saying. And sometimes too, it may not hurt to even ask them a question related to what you're doing. Sometimes they don't even know what they're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. That kind of leads to a couple of the questions I had prepared beforehand related to how you, I guess, not gain the confidence, but how you realize that you have the confidence to really do this. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. This is also known as the internal critic for those who don't know what imposter syndrome is, but that's basically the feeling that you shouldn't be in the position that you're in because you don't have the skills that you need to do that, or you've never worked your way up there, so like why do you deserve this position? So I'd love, Sonia, if you could tell us a little bit about any experiences you've had with imposter syndrome, and like how do you really get through that?
I get through imposter syndrome by, like I said, knowing my stuff. Really, I rely on. First of all, I do love to learn. I read everything, so it's about making sure I'm armed, so to speak, with enough information that if anybody asks me a question, I'm able to answer it and still feel confident enough if I don't know it and say, okay, well, that's a good question. I'll get back to you on that. When do you need an answer by? And it's interesting because I suffered a lot from imposter syndrome when I was in journalism. I did, and I think a lot of it was because of ADHD, right? And not knowing that I had that at the time. And to be honest with you, everything I've ever had to achieve I had to do on my own. Like I broke into that industry. I didn't know anybody. I don't come from a family of wealth. I don't come from a big educated family. I don't come from a family of connections either. So for me, it was about always picking up the phone and saying, hi, my name is Sonia Denton, and I admire what you're doing. And how do I get there? Can you give me some advice? And building my connections that way. Yeah. So every time you're able to achieve something on your own gives you more confidence. It gives you more confidence and a foundation that you can build on. And, I always this is a tip and it's important. Everything that you do is a teachable moment. You're going to go into meetings where you're feeling, I don't like this person. I really don't. Well, you know what? Roll up your sleeves, lean into it, figure out why you don't like it, figure out how you can turn that around. That's a teachable moment. Meeting didn't go well. Dissect it in your mind. Why didn't it go well? Maybe your performance was off. Maybe you were rambling too much. Who knows? But make sure that next time there's an opportunity, that doesn't happen to you again. So I've always created scenarios for myself in everyday situations for me to be able to practice. Sometimes I may walk around with my phone and just talk. I ask myself a question and I talk. Am I umming? Am I hawing? Am I, doing all sorts of things that may particularly turn people off? I may sometimes turn on my camera and just answer a question. You know what I mean? Am I saying, whatever, right? Because all of those things, people are judging you on. So I do everything I can to remove the obstacle before I face it. And that's how I try to tackle that imposter syndrome, so to speak.
Amazing. Okay, so it sounds like Margaret is back, so I'm going to ask that she be brought up to the stage so we can start grilling her again. So Margaret, we've been talking about imposter syndrome, so I'd love to hear your experiences with it. But also to add to that, one of the ways that you can like feel more confident is really to recognize your own accomplishments. So I'm wondering if you can both speak about your own experiences with any imposter syndrome, and also like how do you recognize your own accomplishments?
Sure, it's good to be back. I have been enjoying the conversation, and listening to Sonia is really inspiring. She has done stuff on her own, and that's what has built confidence. And it's the same thing for me. And but before I go into that, I just wanted also to just touch on the question around men are more risk takers in comparison to women. And I just want to give us women credit, because I think society has been raising us in a safe way. So
Yeah.
girls, you're raised to, be neat, be clean, be able to cook, all these aspects that should groom you into this, perfect woman when you do grow up, or a wife, or for my society, the ultimate thing is maybe to be married and so on. And so the way we are groomed is to naturally approach things in the safe way, to think things through. How will I be perceived? Whereas if you see the way boys are groomed, it's often risk taking, all the toys that they play with, or all the cartoons that they watch, it's superheroes and cars driving fast and so on. So naturally they have been conditioned to take risks, and it comes easier for them. Whereas for a woman, for instance, at this point, you're thinking about work, you're thinking about your own home, and things of that nature. There's so many aspects that we have to take into account in making decisions. And so I hope that this kind of platform is a place that's going to encourage failure. I think also women, we don't like to fail. Maybe it's frowned upon more so for women than it is for men. So we need to encourage failure. Failure is okay. It's an opportunity to learn. You take calculated risks. If you are not used to taking risks, connect to women who have taken those risks and think through, and learn their thought process, because like Sonia said, we think through things a lot. So one of the things it might be to master how people that do take risks are able to take them. Read books, people who are successful in your field. Often autobiographies are a great way to get into people's minds and see the way they think. So that's a way of overcoming that. Around imposter syndrome, that's something that I also faced from the time when I was younger. I come from a background where, you need to be top of the class all the time. And, when you're not performing well, it's evident to everyone else. And so even to get to the point of doing a PhD, I can tell you that the younger me, it was out of character for me, as my younger self. But one of the things that works for me, and everyone has different ways of doing that. Sonia talked about, talking to herself and being able to coach herself in that way. For me, spirituality is important. So one of the things that helped me was tapping into myself spiritually, and ensuring that the decisions I make align and give me peace. And what that means is that any decision I make sure that it does not contradict my values or the things that are important to me. And it does not get in the way. Sometimes you can do a good thing that gets in the way of a great thing. So just thinking about what I'm doing. Do I have the skills to do what I'm doing? And sometimes taking it a step at the time. Sometimes if you think long term, it can be overwhelming. Like when I think the vision I have for MedAtlas, it's so big that sometimes I'm like, will I be able to achieve this? But for me, for instance, in the beginning, a small achievement was being able to pitch my idea and people understand it, and you
Mhm.
take that win. Then the next step is, if you do win a competition, or if for us in our pilot, when patients came back and said, this is a fantastic idea, I hope you can grow. Like those small wins, keep pushing you. So sometimes, map out little steps to get to where you're going to, so that you're not overwhelmed. You also can't do everything alone. Realize that you do have weaknesses. And so embrace those weaknesses. Whatever skill that you're lacking, be aware of it and look for the people who are strong in that area. And whether it's your mentor, whether it's your partner, for instance, with MedAtlas, having a tech partner, it's not a bad thing to have a weakness or to not be able to do certain things, but it's a bad thing to stay stuck on that. So find the people, or find the resources, or find the advice that will take you from one step to another, but also have a cheering team. oftentimes when I'm overwhelmed by MedAtlas, there's one or two people that I know that I can talk to who will say, hang in there, you're doing the right thing, don't give up. So identify those people in your circle who you can connect with, or that activity that you can connect with that can take you out of that slump, because starting a business is exciting, but the process is challenging. And so you need to ensure that you know the things that work for you that can get you from those difficult places to your next step.
Amazing. That is fantastic, and actually leads to a couple of questions that the audience has asked. But before we get to those, earlier when you were stepping out, someone asked about your business model. How does your company make money?
Great question. So what we're doing is it's a fee per transaction. So for every consultation that takes place on our platform, we charge $10. The best way I can explain it is maybe like Uber. So when you pay for Uber, there's a percentage fee that goes to your driver, and then a percentage fee that goes to Uber. As we grow, we are going to add an aspect where our service providers pay a monthly subscription fee for being on our platform, but also we are going to incorporate a fintech aspect to help our clients to be able to save up to whatever treatment they're going to need, because specialist care is often expensive. And so we are going to support them in designing sustainable ways to bring those funds together for them to be able to pay for the services that they need. But we're also thinking about having workshops incorporated into our model. A big part of what we need to do is education. And so bringing those aspects, those workshops, educating on different conditions will also be an opportunity to generate revenues.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so there's two questions that are related in the chat. So we've got one of the questions is, what age did you start your business? The second question, the question right after that is like, how do you know when you're qualified and prepared to start a company, or should you hold on to your ideas for the future? So we're going to throw it back to Sonia to answer both of those questions.
Oh my goodness, you're asking me my age? Well, I'm not going to tell you my age. What I'll tell you is I started in my 30s, okay? So let's start there. So yes. So the age part, it kind of threw me off. What was the next part of the question?
Okay, we'll skip that part. So how do you know that you are qualified and prepared to be an entrepreneur?
Oh, wow.
Or how do you know, like, if you should maybe like hold on, go get some experience, and then come back to your idea later?
Well, number one, I was able to break into a business that was extremely difficult to get into. Broadcasting is not easy. And I did it, like I said to you before, with very few, with nothing really. So I did that and learned so many things along the way. One poignant moment of my career, I remember, okay, first of all, you start out in the C market, and then you go to a B, and then you get to an A, right? So a B market would be like a Winnipeg or a Sudbury, and then, C market would be like, Calgary, of course, Toronto's an A market. So, so there I am in Sault Ste. Marie, been there for 2 years, and my boss had said to me, you know what, you're going to be an anchor. I said, okay. For me, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm not anchoring here. I'm ready to move on, right? Anchoring there would be fine, mind you. Sault Ste. Marie is a bureau, but he would want me in Sudbury. So, this was a man who was quite used to kiboshing people's job opportunities, because he knew that he wanted to keep the talent and then, farm them out as he saw fit. So, a little birdie told me that he was doing the same to me. I remember missing out on a number of job opportunities, and I said to my dad, I remember crying to him, and he's like, what do we need to do? And I said, well, I need to get in front of these people. He's like, okay, when you're ready, let me know. So to me, that's a huge obstacle. In entrepreneurship, we are always going to be facing obstacles, especially gatekeepers who are there. They've got the resources, they've got the connections to help you get into your next phase. So how do you, remove the obstacle? What I did was, over 7 months, I cultivated relationships with the news directors in different cities that I was interested in. What does that mean? It means, asking, hey, I'd love to send you my tape. Please give me some feedback. And then, of course, you're not just reporting. You're a photographer, you're the camera person, you're the editor, you're the sound person, you're doing everything. So it's not just the reporting, it's also building up the skill set to show the person, hey, this is what I've done. Did that for 7 months. Finally, hey, I'm going to be in town. Would love to see you. They're like, of course, drop by. 3 cities in 2 days, right? So I was news director, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Calgary, right? 6 months later, I was promoted to anchor in Sudbury. A year later, I was at the Radio and Television News Directors Conference in Ottawa, where I came out of there with 3 job interviews. One of them is CTV Ottawa, the boss Kai Bosch. When I walked into his office and I said, by the way, I'm leaving for CBC Calgary, he looked at me and he said, how did that happen?
Oof.
Yeah, how did that happen? So, I mean, over the years, from saying I'm going to Germany and I'm going to study German, right, and then go into the University of Cologne and study Italian, to I'm going to want to, become a journalist. Oh, okay, I'm going to land a job at RTL, an internship at RTL, which is a large broadcast in Europe. To you don't speak German, you speak German with an accent, so maybe you should, be in fluff news. I'm like, I don't want to be in fluff news. I want to be in news. Coming back here, picking up the phone, Ryerson, how do I get in? To how do I get into the business? I've always, these are skills that you've learned over time. When you fail on air, how do you pick yourself back up? It's life. These are stepping stones and building blocks. So when you ask me, do I think I want to, how did I know I had the chops to be an entrepreneur? In one sense, I have been building the skills over years to become one. And these are skills that now I'm taking, and I'm being able to, of course, navigate my way through, of course, the tech industry and or just the beauty and wellness space. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. You did. I like that you asked that every time you answered a question. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sonia. Margaret, I'm actually going to send the last audience question to you for the final question today. So what is your biggest failure, or what is one of the big obstacles you've had to come over as an entrepreneur? Tell us about it, what happened, and how did you get through it?
It's a fantastic question. You can always learn from failures. So before MedAtlas, I had an organization which was called Infertility Voices. The goal of the organization was to advocate for people who are struggling to have children or struggling to start a family. And I was so excited. I had thought through the name and what we would do and published that on my social so that my networks could know. And one of my close friends replied to me and sent me a message and said, Infertility Voices is not the name of the organization is not something that she would like to be a part of, because she had personally gone through infertility and the name was negative. She didn't want to see herself as an infertile person, but someone who's facing a life challenge that hopefully will be resolved. And so initially I was like, oh my God, I was taken aback. You get into your emotions, especially when you're passionate about something. It's very difficult to hear negative feedback. At least that was the case for me. And so I jumped into this mode of trying to explain to her why we had come up with the name. And after I had a good night's sleep and thought about it, I said, this person went out of their way to share this feedback. They did not have to, and share something that was very personal. And what I should have done was take some time to think about what they've said, have my emotions subside, and then respond, because I was almost dismissing their opinion or their personal experience because I was so tied to the name of the company. And yet in reality, this was a potential customer of mine. So someone that I should have listened to, and I should have asked, what suggestions do you have? What do you think we can do? And people like that are often your best, what we call your first customers, your early adopters, right? And so that in the time, felt like a failure, because in the end I abandoned the name because I knew that if she feels that way, other people do. And of course, it hurts your ego to kind of retract from something that you have already shared with everyone. But I took that experience into MedAtlas, and it really humbled me and just required of me now to always think about my ideal customer and always ask them first about certain aspects, and love the negative feedback, because that actually helps you create a better product, because you do not know everything. And so failure is not failure unless you learn from it. So any failure that you have ever gone through is priming you for whatever amazing thing that you're going to do in the future. It helps humble you so that you can hear from other people, but it will also help you be more intentional and critical moving forward.
Amazing. Okay, said that was the last question, but I have one really quick, like 30-second response from both of you. I'd love you both to leave us with one piece of advice that you wish you got when you were starting your company. So one big nugget. And we'll start with Sonia.
Okay. I think I might have touched on it before, that you're going to be always, people are not going to maybe like what you do. They're going to always, try to plant seeds of doubt in your mind. Not everyone's going to like you, right? It's to really understand who's in front of you so you can pick sense from nonsense, right? Is this a person who's for you? Is this a person not for you? You need to know how to do that quickly, or it'll cost you. You need to know what people's intentions are, or it's going to cost you, right? And as you know, entrepreneurship is not cheap; it's expensive. It's vital. Truly, it's extremely vital. So that's one nugget I think that is important.
Fantastic. Thanks for that advice. All right, Margaret, same question. What's one piece of advice you would give yourself, I guess, if you were starting over again? What is one thing that we can take away as an audience from your experience?
The one thing is, if you're an entrepreneur, you're probably developing something that either someone has never thought about or conceptualized in the way that you do. So the most important thing is that you understand what you're trying to do. I think someone asked earlier, how do you know when you're ready or to start a business? Start it and see what happens, because then you'll know where the gaps are and whether you are ready to take it to the next step, whatever that might be, taking another course or investing in it. Try it, and that's how you build confidence. So for me, I've never thought about myself as an entrepreneur, but I just winged it and found all the areas that I am really good at, and the areas that I need support. And sometimes just enjoy the journey. I think sometimes you overthink things and you're like, oh my gosh, if this is not successful, whether or not whatever happens to what you're doing, you are going to learn something that is going to be valuable for you in the future. Whether it's the connections you make, whether it's the skills that you pick up, you will learn something either way. And I hope that, whatever it is that you were thinking, now we have given you, the tools and the encouragement and the motivation to just try it anyway and see how it goes.
Fantastic. Thank you for leaving with us with that. I agree. Just go out and do it. Thank you both, Sonia and Margaret, for being so generous with your time and answering these questions today and really just engaging with our audience. I know I personally got a lot of motivation to go out and try something, so I'm sure our audience did too. I do want to also thank our audience for the wonderful questions that you've been throwing into the chat. That's fantastic. To everyone who joined us today, we welcome you back to the second session of the Women's Powerhouse series that'll happen on November 3rd. It'll be the same time, same place. So that'll be a session that we'll use as an opportunity to break out into smaller groups to share, collaborate, and brainstorm on various topics. A lot of the things that we talked about today, so overcoming challenges as a female founder, that's what we're going to focus on in that session. So please come, connect, ask questions, and you might even find your potential company co-founder. So don't forget to contact MCE if you'd like to book a meeting with myself or one of our other 3 startup coaches. We also have a lot of support and funding for your entrepreneurial journey. So please reach out if you're starting something awesome. We are right at time. So once again, thank you both for speaking with us today. I'm sure our audience got a lot out of it. Thank you to the audience for joining us. And with that, everyone, I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Bye.